Welcome, dear listener. The empire slept under the weight of politics, whispers and shadows, but so did its secrets inside his villa. Tiberius had mastered the art of perfect sleep, turning every breath, shadow and scent into a ritual of control and calm. Lavender and rosemary guided him, the gentle trickle of fountains became a steady pulse, and every flicker of light choreographed a silent symphony. Yet beyond the walls the world waited, unpredictable, restless, alive. In the darkened courtyard Livia paused, sensing a line she was not meant to cross. Marcus watched her questioning, but she only whispered, "Silence is our strategy. No marks, no signals, no answers, just observation." The unseen eyes of the hidden order measured every choice, and in that quiet every hesitation became a declaration. Tonight they would give nothing, and in giving nothing they would reveal everything. Meanwhile Tiberius surrendered to his own meticulously orchestrated world, the shadows stretching in calculated patterns, the herbs scenting the air, the whispering walls echoing soft guidance. Each inhale drew serenity, each exhale released the burdens of Rome. The empire could wait outside, forces plotted and watched, but inside he was untouchable, commanding his own mind and body. In this night of perfect stillness two worlds converged, the emperor mastering sleep and strength, and Livia mastering silence and suspense. Power, clarity and revelation were born not from conquest but from control, observation and the rare magic of unbroken calm.
Welcome, dear listener. Night in the Roman palace had its own quiet magic. The tall stone columns stood still. The torches burned with soft amber light, and a gentle breeze drifted through the long corridors. Everything settled into a hush that wrapped the palace like a thin blanket. Yet, even in this calm, Emperor Tiberius often found sleep difficult. Power brings security, but it carries weight, and that weight follows a ruler even into the night. Over many years, however, Tiberius created his own rituals, little habits that helped him sink into deep and peaceful rest. When the day ended and the guards changed shifts, Tiberius walked slowly toward his private chamber. His room was wide with marble walls, but the atmosphere inside felt warm and comforting. Soft wool rugs covered the floor, and blue curtains swayed gently near the window, stirred by the evening wind. Tiberius believed that worry should never cross the door with him. "If you don't command your thoughts," he would say, "they will begin to command you." So, at the door of his chamber, he would pause beside a small copper bowl filled with clean water. Every night he washed his hands in it. To him, it was more than washing. It was a small reminder that the mind can also be rinsed from the dust of the day. As he stepped inside, his attendant Marcus lit a clay lamp filled with a calming scent. The fragrance was the same one Tiberius's mother used when he was a child. It was earthy and soft, like fresh soil after rain. Whenever he breathed it in, he felt as if he had stepped back into a simpler time, days when sleep came without effort and the world made fewer demands. Tiberius removed his heavy royal robes and soaked his feet in a warm basin of water mixed with salt and gentle herbs. The warm water loosened his muscles and eased the tension in his legs. He often said, "Give the body comfort and the mind will follow." Tiny ripples in the basin moved under his feet, taking away the day's exhaustion. This alone made him feel his chest growing lighter. After that, he would sit beside the open window. The Roman sky glittered with stars, wide and endless. Knowing that the heavens were far bigger than his empire always calmed him. It humbled him, yet also comforted him. It reminded him he wasn't carrying the world alone. When his breathing slowed and his thoughts softened, he lay down on his bed. It was filled with dried leaves and soft wool, made in a way that molded gently around his body. It felt like sinking into a warm nest. Before closing his eyes, he looked at a wooden plaque placed beside the bed. His father had carved the words into it. "After a hard day, restful sleep is a gift. Learn to accept it." Reading those words, Tiberius let his eyelids fall. Slowly, calmly, sleep wrapped around him like a warm cloak. Just before drifting off each night, Tiberius allowed his memory to wander. It often carried him back to the garden of his childhood home. He remembered the evenings when his mother would sit beside him and hum old Greek lullabies. Those gentle tunes had the power to melt fear, silence worry, and guide even a restless child toward sleep. In the quiet of his chamber, he tried to recreate that feeling. He sat on a stone bench near his window while Marcus softly played the lyre. The music filled the room like a thin thread of calm. Every note floated in the air for a moment, then faded into the walls. Tiberius always closed his eyes, letting the melody settle inside him. He knew sleep didn't start with the body, it started with the mind. A noisy mind never rests, no matter how tired the body feels. His mother used to tell him, "Each night, clear the dust from your heart. If you don't, it will follow you into your dreams." So he created a small nightly practice. Before lying down, he would think of 3 things: what went well today, what troubled him, and what he was thankful for. This simple reflection allowed him to release anything he didn't want to carry into the night. It softened the edges of the day and made room for quiet. Once his thoughts grew still, he lay down on his bed and placed a hand over his chest. It was his way of reminding himself, the day is over, rest now. Outside, the footsteps of the guards softened as they walked farther down the corridor. The lamplight in his room dimmed to a faint glow, leaving only a warm circle of light. Marcus stopped playing the lyre and gently drew the curtains across the window. The rustling fabric was the final signal that the day had ended. Inside the room, only the soft whisper of the night breeze remained. Tiberius's breaths grew deeper. His shoulders relaxed first, then the tension in his neck eased, and the tiredness in his arms finally drifted away. Little by little, he felt himself sinking into the mattress. Sleep was never something he forced. It came to him when he surrendered his thoughts and allowed his mind to settle. In the last moments before sleep, he often told himself, "The empire will wait for me until morning, but this night belongs only to me." And with that, he would slip into a deep, calm sleep, the kind of rest he guarded as carefully as he guarded Rome itself. Morning in Rome always arrived with a certain pride, but before dawn truly claimed the sky, there was a softer hour, an hour Tiberius valued deeply. It was the time when the world was quiet enough to hear one's own thoughts without interruption. Most people believed the emperor woke up early because of discipline. In truth, he woke early because he loved the gentle silence before the palace stirred. But every peaceful night began with a peaceful sleep, and every peaceful sleep brought him closer to this quiet dawn. As he rested, Tiberius often drifted into dreams shaped by memories, not fantasies. In these dreams, he walked through the old orchard behind his childhood home. The leaves shimmered under the faint moonlight, and he could almost feel the cool earth beneath his feet. Sometimes he dreamed of his father's steady voice, or the sound of the river flowing near the villa where he grew up. These dreams never frightened him or carried him into chaos. They were soft, slow, and safe, exactly the kind of rest he needed to prepare his mind for ruling an empire. There was a reason his dreams remained calm. Tiberius believed that a person could train the mind just like a soldier trains his body. And so, each night, before he fully surrendered to sleep, he shaped the thoughts he wanted to carry into the night. He avoided imagining wars, councils, or decisions. Instead, he focused on gentle memories. The scent of olive trees, the soft touch of his mother's hand on his head, or the steady rhythm of his father's footsteps on the villa's stone floor. These peaceful thoughts followed him into his dreams and helped him rest without disturbance. Marcus, the attendant, who knew the emperor better than most, had once asked him, "My lord, how do you keep your dreams so calm when your days are filled with such heavy matters?" And Tiberius replied in a quiet voice, "A mind that wants peace must choose peace before sleep." Marcus never forgot those words. Sometimes during the night, the faint sounds of Rome would drift through the palace windows, distant chatter, a horse pulling a cart, or the soft call of a night bird. But the emperor never stirred. His breathing remained slow and steady. He had learned how to let the world continue without feeling the need to respond. It was a skill many envied. As the night deepened, the lamp in his room gradually faded. The clay bowl near his bed released its soft scent through the air. The curtains moved gently with the wind, and the rhythm of the night cradled the emperor like a quiet lullaby. In the final hours before morning, Tiberius entered his deepest sleep. This was the sleep where his mind completely let go. In this silence, he felt no pressure, no responsibility, no weight of the throne. There was only the softness of the night around him and the steady beating of his heart. It was in these hours that Tiberius found something precious, something he never spoke about, not even to Marcus. A simple truth. Even a ruler sleeps best when he remembers he is human. On certain nights when the wind carried a cooler touch, Tiberius preferred to sleep with the window slightly open. He said it reminded him of the sea breeze from Capri, where he sometimes stayed to escape the noise of Rome. The gentle night air made the curtains sway just enough to create a soft, familiar rhythm. It was the kind of movement that felt alive, yet calming, almost like the deep breathing of a resting giant. Marcus often checked on him quietly to make sure the night air wasn't too cold, but each time he peeked inside, he saw the same scene. The emperor lying still, one hand on his chest, his face relaxed, a faint hint of peace softening his features. The man who commanded armies rested like a child who finally felt safe. Tiberius had learned long ago that the world outside would always be demanding. Council meetings, letters from generals, petitions from senators, all of it created noise. But inside his room, he allowed none of it to follow him. He kept his chamber uncluttered, with no maps, no scrolls, and no reminders of duty. The room was intentionally simple: a bed, a table, a lamp, and a small wooden box containing tiny items from his past. He believed that the fewer distractions around him, the easier it was for the mind to quiet down. In the wooden box were things he rarely showed anyone. A smooth river stone he picked up as a boy, a small piece of cloth from his mother's tunic, a ring his father once wore. These little objects carried memories, and on nights when sleep was slow to arrive, he would hold one of them for a moment. The quiet weight of the object reminded him of where he came from and who he had been long before the world called him emperor. This grounding brought him back to himself, helping him let go of the noise that power placed on his shoulders. Sometimes, when he couldn't quite settle, he practiced a simple exercise his father had taught him. He would close his eyes and imagine a single candle burning in the darkness, nothing else, just the candle. He watched it in his mind until every other thought faded away. Slowly, the flame's soft glow filled the quiet space inside him. This focus helped him slow his breathing and loosen the tension in his chest. Marcus, noticing how well this worked for the emperor, once asked if he could teach the technique to younger soldiers who struggled with fear at night. Tiberius agreed. He told them, "If a man can calm his mind in the dark, he can face anything in the light." By the middle of the night, after his thoughts softened and his body relaxed, Tiberius entered the kind of sleep that felt like drifting on water. He wasn't sinking or fighting the current, he was simply floating. The hours passed gently, each one washing a little more of the day away. And in this floating rest, he found something that even the crown could not give him: a quiet place when nothing was expected of him at all. There were nights when rain visited Rome softly. It didn't storm or roar, it simply touched the rooftops with a gentle rhythm. Tiberius liked those nights more than he ever admitted. Rain for him was a reminder that even nature rested. The soft tapping against the stone floors of the balcony created a sound he found comforting, almost like a steady heartbeat that wasn't his own. When the evenings grew cloudy, Marcus adjusted the curtains and made sure the room stayed warm. He placed a thicker wool blanket near the emperor's bed and lit a second lamp with a faint golden glow. But Tiberius wasn't bothered by the changing weather. He enjoyed listening to the rain as he prepared for sleep. He would sit near the window with his eyes half closed, letting the soft sounds settle his mind. Sometimes he whispered to Marcus, "The rain knows how to calm the world better than any man." Marcus always smiled at that. He had served the emperor long enough to know that Tiberius found wisdom in simple things. To help himself unwind on such nights, Tiberius had another small ritual. He would take a slow walk across his chamber, touching the cool surface of the walls, the edges of the curtains, and even the wooden frame of his bed. It wasn't a habit born out of worry, but out of grounding. Feeling these familiar textures helped him settle into the present moment. It made his mind less cluttered, like clearing dust from a window to let light pass through. When he finally lay down, the sound of rain on the roof created a natural lullaby. Each drop fell with its own timing, yet somehow they all worked together, forming a soft pattern. Tiberius breathed in rhythm with it, slow, deep, steady breaths. He felt the weight of his blanket settle around him like a secure embrace. Outside his room, the guards stood under the shelter of the corridor. Even they seemed quieter on rainy nights, their footsteps softened, their conversations low. The palace, usually full of echoing movement, sank into a deeper silence. It was as if the rain wrapped the entire structure in calm. Tiberius often imagined that the rain washed Rome clean while he slept, clearing away the worries of the day, not just for him, but for the entire city. This small thought brought him comfort. Whether or not it was true didn't matter. Believing it helped him relax. As he drifted deeper, his mind painted gentle pictures. Sometimes he dreamed of water flowing through the countryside, passing olive trees and small villages where children played in puddles. Other times, he imagined the distant sea waves near Capri, rolling close to the cliffs and pulling back again. These dream images came and went like soft waves, never pulling him sharply, always carrying him smoothly. In the middle of those dreams, the emperor's breath slowed even further. His body loosened into the bed, and the blanket rose and fell with the calm rhythm of his rest. Rainy nights always gave him some of his best sleep, deep, warm, and still. They reminded him that even the sky needed moments of gentle release. Some nights, when the air was cooler and the moon was bright enough to spill silver light across the floor, Tiberius liked to sit awake for a short while before fully settling into bed. He wasn't restless, he simply enjoyed observing the quiet world around him. The palace looked different under moonlight. Shadows softened, corners blurred, and everything felt more peaceful than during the day. Even the marble statues seemed to relax a little, no longer lit by bright daytime lamps. Tiberius often sat at the edge of his bed and watched the moon through the open window. It hung above the city like a silent guardian, steady and unchanging. He found comfort in that steady glow. For a man whose days were filled with decisions and shifting alliances, the moon's calm stillness felt like a friend who never asked anything of him. He would breathe slowly, trying to match the pace of the night around him. Inhale, pause, exhale. He had learned that slow breathing quieted the mind better than any command or effort. It was his way of letting go of the day, one breath at a time. Marcus knew these moments were important, so he always kept his movements soft and unobtrusive. He walked lightly, adjusted the curtains without a sound, and set a warm cup of herbal water near the bedside. The drink was made from simple ingredients: honey, mint, and a pinch of crushed fennel. Tiberius didn't drink it every night, but the scent alone helped him relax. One evening, while setting the cup down, Marcus whispered, "My lord, the palace sleeps easier when you sleep peacefully." Tiberius gave a faint smile and replied, "Peace begins in the mind of the one who leads. If I do not rest, how can I expect the empire to rest?" It wasn't spoken with pride. It was spoken like a man who understood the weight of example. After Marcus left the room, the emperor took a slow sip of the warm drink. The sweetness from the honey softened the edges of his thoughts, and the mint cooled the back of his throat. He placed the cup aside and lay down, letting the warmth spread through his chest and settle into his body. The moonlight slid across the room, touching the walls and the side of the bed. Tiberius watched it for a moment longer until his eyes grew heavy. He didn't try to force sleep. He simply allowed tiredness to come naturally. His breathing slowed even more, and his body relaxed into the mattress. In the quiet, he listened to the night sounds, the distant call of an owl, the faint rustle of leaves outside, and the occasional soft tap of a guard's steps far down the corridor. None of these sounds disturbed him. Instead, they blended together into a soft background haze that helped him drift deeper. Before sleep fully took over, he whispered a small thought he often repeated. "Tonight is enough. I have done what I could." With that simple acceptance, he allowed his mind to fade into rest. His thoughts dissolved like mist, and the world around him grew softer and softer until it disappeared completely. In that peaceful silence, Tiberius sank into another calm night of deep, restorative sleep.
He had a habit on such nights. He would take a small piece of parchment and write a single sentence. Not a report, not an order, just a personal line that captured something he wanted to leave behind. Sometimes it was a worry he no longer needed. Sometimes it was a thought he wanted to release. And sometimes it was gratitude for something small that had gone right. He never kept these pieces of parchment. After writing, he folded the sheet and placed it inside the wooden box beside his bed. In the morning, Marcus removed it and quietly burned it in the courtyard fire. Tiberius didn't need proof of what he wrote. The act of writing was enough to shift the burden out of his mind. After this ritual, he washed his hands and face with warm water mixed with rosemary. The faint scent rose into the air and cleared the heaviness from the day. He liked how the water felt, simple, grounding, familiar. With his shoulders easing, he walked to the open window. The city lights shimmered in the distance, tiny and scattered like fallen stars. Rome never slept entirely, but from this height, its noise felt far away. Tiberius placed his hands on the windowsill and breathed slowly until his heartbeat softened. When he finally lay down, the mattress welcomed him with the same steady embrace it always did. He positioned his head on the soft wool pillow and felt his body sink deeper into comfort. The warm blanket covered him, and the room grew even quieter. He listened to the faint hum of the night. On late evenings like this, he often drifted off faster than expected. His mind, emptied through writing and reflection, slipped easily into the softness of sleep. As he neared the edge of rest, he thought to himself, "Even a long day can end gently." And with that final thought, his breathing deepened, his muscles loosened, and sleep carried him away, like a gentle tide pulling slowly toward the shore. Night settled over the Roman frontier like a heavy blanket. The wind carried the smell of cold stone and burning oil from the watchtowers. Livia stood on the rampart with her cloak pulled tight. The day had been filled with drills, reports, and orders, but her mind kept circling back to the same thought. Someone inside the fort was working against her. Marcus joined her at the wall. His steps were quiet, his face tired from hours of training recruits who barely knew how to hold their shields. He didn't need to ask why she was awake. Livia had been restless for days. "You're waiting for the same thing I'm waiting for," he said. "A mistake." "Not mine," she said. "Theirs." Below the wall, the campfires burned like scattered stars. Troops moved in and out of tents, unaware that a shadow in their ranks had already placed them all in danger. Marcus leaned on the cold stone. If the reports are right, the tribes are gathering faster than expected. Someone is feeding our movements. Livia didn't answer right away. She was watching the forest line. It looked still, but she had learned years ago that stillness could be a disguise. "Tonight," she said, "we set a trap." Marcus raised a brow. For the enemy outside or the one inside? For the one who thinks they can play both sides and walk free. A horn sounded in the distance, not loud, not close, but clear enough. Marcus stiffened. That wasn't ours. "No," Livia said. She pushed away from the wall. It was a signal. They hurried down the stone steps and crossed the yard. Soldiers stopped and glanced at them, sensing something had shifted. Livia headed straight for the command tent. Inside, only one lantern burned. The maps on the table shook as she dropped a leather pouch in front of Marcus. Inside were 3 small wooden pieces with carved markings. He frowned. "Where did you get these?" "From a scout I trusted," she said. "He didn't make it back alive. These were in his coat." Marcus turned the pieces in his palm. These matched the markings near the northern valley. The tribes use these when they send secret routes. Livia nodded, which means they knew where our scout was going, and someone told them. Marcus looked at her with a quiet seriousness. "Then your traitor is not a rumor anymore." Before she could speak, a shout erupted outside the tent. Steel clashed, a torch fell. A soldier ran past the entrance yelling for reinforcements. Livia grabbed her sword. "They're already here." Marcus followed her out. The entire yard lit up with fire and chaos. A small group of raiders had slipped through the eastern gate, moving with frightening confidence, as if they knew the layout better than the guards themselves. Livia cut down the first attacker who charged her, then shouted orders to the troops. Marcus pulled 3 soldiers together and pushed back toward the gate. As the fighting spread, Livia caught sight of someone slipping between the shadows behind the barracks. Not a raider, a Roman, hooded, moving fast. She didn't hesitate. She went after him. The man sprinted toward the outer wall, using torches and confusion to mask his escape. He climbed a stack of supply crates and reached for the top of the wooden barrier. "Stop!" Livia called. He didn't. He jumped. She climbed after him, sword in hand, heart pounding. On the other side of the wall, the hooded figure was already running toward the dark forest. Livia landed hard, caught her balance, and charged after him. Tonight, she wasn't chasing an enemy scout. She was chasing the truth. The forest swallowed the noise of the fort behind her. One moment there was shouting and steel, and the next there was only the mudded thud of her boots and the faint crack of branches under the traitor's feet. The moon pushed through the clouds just enough for Livia to see his silhouette darting between the trees. He moved like someone who knew the terrain well, which made her suspicion even sharper. This wasn't a frightened messenger. This was someone trained, confident, and used to running in the dark. She pushed harder. For a moment, she lost him behind a fallen pine. Then she heard the sound of fabric catching on bark ahead. She followed the sound until she reached a narrow ravine. The traitor was climbing down the sloped edge, trying to reach the stream below. She jumped. Her boots slid on the loose dirt, but she controlled her balance and hit the bottom just as he splashed through the shallow water. He turned his head, startled, then changed direction and sprinted downstream. "Coward," she said under her breath, and chased him again. The stream curved left, leading into a stretch where the trees grew tighter together. Their branches knitted overhead, leaving only thin silver lines of moonlight. The ground was uneven, covered with roots and stones. It worked in her favor. The hooded man stumbled once, twice, each time losing a little speed. She was gaining. He glanced back. In that moment, his hood slipped just enough for her to see a piece of his face. Her breath caught. She knew him. He had trained under Marcus. He had eaten in the same hall. He had stood guard at the western tower just 2 days ago. Rufus. The quiet one. The one who blended so easily into the background that no one ever questioned him. He noticed the recognition in her eyes, and his pace became frantic. "You won't make it out," she called. Rufus didn't answer. He only pushed harder. The stream split into 2 narrow paths. Rufus took the left. Livia followed without hesitation, even when the water deepened and the mud began to suck at her boots. She was close enough now to hear his breath turning ragged. Then the forest opened into a clearing. A large tree lay across the far edge, its trunk wide and rotten. Rufus tried to climb it, but the wood crumbled under his hands. Livia reached him before he could get over the top. She grabbed his cloak and yanked him back. He spun, pulling a dagger from under his sleeve. She blocked the first strike, then the second. Their blades scraped in the dark. Rufus tried to twist away, but she stepped inside his reach and kicked his knee, sending him down in the mud.
"Why?" she said.
Her voice was steady, but her heart hammered. "You fought beside us. You ate with us. Why betray your own?" Rufus looked up, breathing hard. Mud streaked his face. His dagger trembled in his hand. "You think this is betrayal?" he said. "You're blind, Livia. The Empire is rotting. We're the ones saving it." She narrowed her eyes. "Who is we?" Rufus gave a cold smile. Too late to ask. He slashed at her ankle and tried to bolt, but she grabbed his arm and twisted. The dagger fell. She locked his wrist and forced him down. "Who are you working for?" she said. He pressed his lips together. He wasn't going to talk. She pulled him upright, keeping his arms pinned. "You'll talk at the fort." Rufus didn't resist, not until she stepped out of the clearing. A soft whistle cut through the night. Livia froze. Rufus smiled. "They're closer than you think." Before she could react, an arrow sliced through the dark and hit Rufus in the chest. He gasped once and crumpled in her arms. She looked around, sword raised, but the forest was silent again. Whoever shot the arrow was already gone. She let Rufus fall gently to the ground. The mud beneath him turned dark with blood. The traitor was dead, but the threat wasn't. Someone out there had just silenced him, and they had done it with perfect timing. Livia looked toward the trees and took a slow breath. This wasn't a simple betrayal. It was a network, and tonight she had only seen the first thread. Livia stayed still until her heartbeat settled. The clearing was quiet again, the kind of quiet that felt watched. She scanned the tree line, looking for any shift in the branches or the faint outline of someone retreating. Nothing moved. Whoever had fired the arrow knew how to disappear without leaving a trace. She crouched beside Rufus. The arrow sat deep in his chest, straight and deliberate. The fletching was dark green. She had seen that style once, years ago, during a border skirmish along the northern frontier. A group of mercenaries used arrows like this. They worked for coin and swore loyalty to no one. If they were involved here, the situation was already larger than a simple act of treason. Livia rose and cleaned her hands in the cold water of the stream. The night air pressed around her, heavy and expectant. She needed to get back to the fort, but she also needed proof. She searched Rufus carefully and found a small metal token tied to a string under his tunic. It showed a symbol she didn't recognize, a circle with 3 lines crossing through the center, sharp and purposeful. She slipped the token into her belt and stood again. The moonlight revealed the path she had taken, but it also reminded her how far she had run. The fort felt distant, almost unreal in the quiet of the forest. She started walking, keeping her sword drawn. Every shadow looked like it might step forward. Halfway back, she heard water dripping from the branches overhead. The scent of pine grew thicker. The forest always changed at night. Sounds stretched. Small animals moved with the confidence of things that belonged here more than humans ever did. When the fort's torches finally appeared between the trees, Livia let out a slow breath. 2 guards were posted at the gate. Their faces tightened when they saw her alone. "Where is the runner?" one of them asked. "Dead," Livia said, "and he didn't die by accident." The guards exchanged a nervous look. She could almost feel the shift in the air. Word of a traitor was one thing. Word of a hidden enemy in the forest was another. She walked directly to the command hall. Marcus was waiting inside, leaning over a map. His shoulders were tense. He looked up as soon as she entered. "You found him?" Marcus asked. "Yes," she said, "and someone else found us." She placed the green fletched arrow on the table. Marcus stared at it for a long moment. His jaw tightened. "I have seen these before." "So have I," she said, "but this time it wasn't random. They wanted him dead before he could speak." Marcus stepped closer. "Did he say anything?" "Enough to know he wasn't working alone," Livia said. She reached into her belt and set the metal token beside the arrow. "And he carried this." Marcus picked it up. His face changed, not with fear, but with recognition. "You know this symbol," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "And if it is involved, everything we thought we understood is about to change." The wind outside shifted, making the wooden shutters creak. The hall felt colder. Livia crossed her arms. "Then tell me what it means." Marcus sighed. "It means we are not facing a single traitor. We're facing a secret order that has been asleep for decades, an order that wants to reshape the empire from the shadows. He looked at her, steady and troubled. And tonight, he said, you stepped into their path. Livia felt the weight of his words settle inside her. The forest, the arrow, the token, none of it was random. Something hidden had started to move, and now she was in the middle of it. The command hall felt colder than usual after Marcus's revelation. Livia stood by the map table, the arrow and the token before her, their silent testimony pressing on her thoughts. A secret order operating in shadows for decades was no small threat. They were patient, careful, and capable of slipping through cracks where even the best guards couldn't follow. Marcus leaned against the table, tracing the symbol with his finger. This order is old, older than most of the records we have. They've moved quietly, influencing, observing, waiting for the right moment. They pick their targets carefully, and now they've marked you as someone who can't be ignored. Livia's mind raced, but she forced herself to slow her breathing. Panic would be useless. Strategy required clarity. How do we know they won't strike again tonight or tomorrow? She asked. Marcus shrugged. We don't, but we do know how they operate. They're meticulous. They leave traces only for those who pay attention. Tonight, the forest gave you a clue. The arrow, the token, they're warnings, yes, but they're also signs of their method. She examined the arrow again. The fletching, the precision, even the curve of the tip. It wasn't the common work of a common mercenary. The green fletching matched ancient patterns used by scouts trained in secrecy. So someone inside the empire taught them, she murmured. Marcus nodded. Or they've infiltrated deeper than we suspect. That's why the scouts we trusted can't be relied upon anymore. Anyone could be working with them or under threat of death. Livia placed her hands on the table. The map stretched beneath her, showing rivers, hills, and the network of forts around the city. If they move again tonight, she said, we need to anticipate them, not just patrols reacting. Marcus looked at her, his gaze sharp. Exactly, and that's why we start here. We create a network of sightlines, hidden signals, and controlled movements. The moment they try to manipulate the empire from the shadows, we'll see it coming. Livia's eyes moved to the token again. The engraved circle with the 3 lines was simple but potent. Whoever created it understood subtlety. Each line and curve meant something: direction, rank, even timing. If we decode this, she said slowly, we might predict their next move. Marcus smiled faintly. That's the hope. But remember, decoding it won't end tonight's threat. It will only give us a fighting chance. She nodded, determination settling in her chest. The arrow, the token, the forest, Rufus's betrayal, they were pieces of a larger puzzle, and she had no choice but to solve it. Prepare the scouts, she said, quietly. No one outside this hall can know yet. Tonight we watch. Tonight we learn. Marcus bent over the map again, already marking routes and positions. Do you want me to place decoys near the forest? Yes, Livia replied, and keep a few hidden in the city. If the order moves, we need eyes everywhere. The hall seemed to close in with shadows and anticipation. Outside, the night whispered through the shutters, carrying the same silent threat that had followed her from the forest. Livia took a deep breath. She knew one thing with certainty: the Empire would not wait for her hesitation, and she would not allow a hidden order to decide its fate from the shadows. Tonight, the game had begun. The first hour of the night passed slowly, each second stretching like a thread through the silent halls of the fort. Livia moved through the dim corridors with measured steps, her cloak brushing the stone floors. Marcus followed, carrying a small bundle of signal lanterns and notes for the scouts stationed beyond the walls. The tension in the air was palpable. Even the guards trained for years seemed more alert than usual. The forest outside remained dark, but Livia could sense its presence. The way the shadows shifted between trees, the faint whisper of wind through branches, and the occasional rustle that might have been an animal or something else. The memory of Rufus and the arrow lingered in Livia's mind, a warning she could not ignore. They reached the central watchtower, a stone structure that overlooked both the fort and the surrounding woods. From this height, Livia could see the torches marking her scouts' posts, small flickers of light that blinked like cautious eyes. She climbed the narrow staircase to the top, her sword at her side, and peered through the dark. Marcus followed, placing the lanterns carefully so they would remain visible to anyone she signaled. "Do you think they'll strike again tonight?" Marcus asked, his voice low, almost lost in the wind. "They're patient," Livia said, her eyes.
The night deepened, and the forest beyond the fort remained an impenetrable sea of darkness. Livia stayed atop the watchtower, her eyes straining to detect the slightest movement, her ears tuned to every rustle, every whisper of the wind. Marcus stood beside her, holding the lantern steady, though his own tension was palpable. They both knew that the quiet could be more dangerous than noise. It meant their enemies moved with skill and patience. Hours passed with the steady rhythm of the night. Occasionally, a fox darted across the clearing or a bird called from the treetops, but the scouts reported no unusual movement beyond the perimeter. It was as if the forest itself held its breath. Livia's mind traced the patterns of the earlier attack: the arrow, Rufus, the token. Each clue pointed to the same conclusion. The hidden order was deliberate, precise, and always one step ahead. "Do you think they're testing us?" Marcus whispered. "Of course," Livia replied. "Every shadow could be a messenger. Every step could be a trap. They want to see how we react, where we are weak." A faint glimmer of light flickered through the trees. Livia stiffened. Not a torch carried by her scouts. This was too small, too precise, too calculated. She leaned forward, trying to make out the figure. The shadows seemed to bend around it, hiding movement and intention. The figure paused, then vanished into the forest, leaving only a whisper of disturbance in its wake. "They're close," she murmured, "closer than we imagined." Marcus adjusted the position of the lanterns, careful not to signal the unknown observer. Livia's mind worked quickly. The fort's gates were secure, the scouts positioned, yet she knew that preparation alone might not be enough. This order didn't rely on brute force. They relied on intelligence, strategy, and fear. She descended the tower silently, moving through the corridors with careful steps. Marcus followed, his presence steadying her. They reached the courtyard where the night air felt heavier, almost electric. Livia's gaze swept over the guards stationed along the walls, checking their positions, reading the tension in their stances. Everyone was alert, yet none were fully aware of the invisible threat pressing in from the shadows. Then a soft whistle sliced through the night, a signal. Livia's blood ran cold. It was not a warning for her, nor was it one of her scouts. This was a message from the hidden order, a calculated gesture that said, "We are here. We see you." She clenched her fists, steadying herself. Marcus stepped closer. "Do you want me to alert the men?" "Not yet," she said. "If we reveal our hand now, they'll disappear. We need to understand them first. We need to know their pattern." Livia walked slowly toward the forest's edge, her boots silent on the stone path. The whistle sounded again, low and melodic, almost mocking. Each note carried through the night like a thread connecting the forest to the fort. She stopped, sensing that whoever sent it was observing her reaction, noting her hesitation and resolve. Marcus laid a hand on her shoulder. "We need patience," he reminded her. "Yes," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the black line of trees. "Patience and caution. One wrong move, and this night becomes our last." The wind shifted, carrying a faint scent of pine and smoke. The forest was alive, the order was moving, and Livia knew that soon the silence would break. When it did, the empire would be forced to wake, and she would have to be ready. The wind carried a chill that bit at Livia's cloak, yet she barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on the forest, where shadows moved with subtle precision. The soft rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl were the only sounds that dared break the oppressive silence. Marcus stayed close, his eyes scanning the dark for any sign of movement. Every sense was sharpened, every thought focused on the invisible threat that had already claimed Rufus and tested the fort's defenses. "Do you think they're watching us now?" Marcus asked, his voice low and measured. "They are," Livia said, her gaze narrowing. "They've been watching since before Rufus was found. Everything we do, every guard we position, every patrol we send, they anticipate it. That's why tonight we need to think like them." She stepped closer to the edge of the courtyard, her boots silent on the stone. The order's signals had been subtle, almost invisible, but Livia had begun to see the pattern: the whistle, the token, the arrow.
Each was a mark of communication, a methodical movement designed to probe, to warn, to manipulate. A soft glimmer of light flickered between the trees. Not a torch carried by a scout, not a lantern, something smaller, someone moving with intent. Livia tensed. "Wait," she whispered, raising a hand to halt Marcus. The figure paused, then vanished. A deliberate disappearance, the kind that spoke of mastery and control. The hidden order was not just skilled, they were confident. Livia felt a surge of determination. This was no ordinary enemy. Every movement was a message, and every message required interpretation. She returned to the central hall of the fort, where her scouts were waiting in concealed positions. Marcus unrolled the maps, tracing the paths and positions they had already prepared. "We need to anticipate, not react," she said. Her voice carried an authority that settled the men. "We cannot wait for them to make the first move. We need to create the conditions in which they reveal themselves." The scouts nodded, understanding the subtlety of the plan. This was not a battle of swords or shields. It was a game of patience, observation, and timing. Hours passed. The forest remained still. The occasional snap of a twig, the faint whistle of wind through leaves, and the rustle of distant animals were the only disturbances. Yet Livia knew better to relax. Each sound could hide intent. Each shadow could conceal an assassin. Finally, the soft whistle returned, closer this time. Livia froze, recognizing the pattern. The order was signaling, directing, observing, and testing in one seamless act. Marcus looked at her. "Do we pursue?" "No," she replied firmly. "We wait. They want a reaction. They want haste. We give them nothing but patience and preparation." The night stretched on, each moment thick with tension. Livia felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, heavier than any sword or shield. The hidden order was not just a threat to the fort, they were a threat to the entire structure of the empire, and she knew that understanding their methods was the only way to survive. The forest whispered, carrying secrets on the wind. Livia listened, every fiber of her being alert. Somewhere in the shadows, the order was moving, and tonight, she vowed, she would be ready when they finally revealed themselves. The first light of dawn had not yet touched the horizon, but Livia remained awake, her senses alert. The night had passed without a direct attack, but the hidden order's presence lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Marcus moved quietly beside her, checking the positions of the scouts and the signals left in the forest from the previous night. Their eyes met occasionally, sharing an unspoken understanding. This was only the beginning. Livia walked slowly to the edge of the fort, where the forest met the stone walls. The air was thick with dew, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Her gaze swept over the undergrowth, searching for any sign of movement, any evidence of the order's passage. Then she noticed something, a subtle disturbance in the soil near a narrow path. Footprints, small, careful, deliberate. Not random travelers, not local animals, but trained individuals. She knelt down, tracing the marks with her gloved hand. The prints were light, almost imperceptible, but they revealed a pattern. The figures had moved quickly, yet carefully, avoiding branches that might snap and leave noise behind. They had passed here after nightfall, and the pattern of their steps suggested reconnaissance. "They've been here," she whispered to Marcus, her eyes scanning the forest. "They're moving through the shadows, studying us, planning the next move." Marcus crouched beside her, examining the footprints with careful precision. "They're not just testing defenses," he said. "They're mapping our fort. Every patrol, every guard rotation, they've recorded it. We need to assume they know every one of our moves." Livia rose, her expression determined. "Then we give them something to watch that isn't real. We create false patterns, distractions, and false signals. If they're patient, so are we." She returned to the command hall where her scouts were preparing for the day. She instructed them to leave subtle signs of activity. Lights flicked on and off in certain rooms, small footprints in the courtyard leading nowhere, doors left slightly ajar to mislead any observer. Every move was calculated to feed the order misleading information, to confuse and frustrate them. Marcus watched her closely. "They'll notice," he said. "Exactly," Livia replied. "They will notice, and that is what we want. Their confidence may falter when their carefully observed patterns produce nothing. They think they're controlling the game, but we're the ones guiding it." The morning air grew lighter, the first sunbeams beginning to pierce the lingering fog, spilling pale light across the fort's courtyard. But Livia's focus did not waver. The hidden order was patient, but patience was not infinite. Every step they took, every observation could be anticipated and countered. She placed the green-fletched arrow and the metal token on the table again, studying them like pieces of a puzzle. Each symbol, each movement, each trace left behind was part of a larger design, and Livia was determined to decode it before the hidden order struck again. "Today," she said to Marcus quietly, "we take the first step toward turning the shadows into something we can see. We learn, and then we act." The forest beyond the walls remained silent, but the footprints, the arrow, and the token whispered a single truth. The hidden order was close, watching and waiting, and Livia, for the first time, felt that they were finally beginning to understand her moves, and perhaps for the first time, she was beginning to understand theirs. The fog rolled in from the northern hills, curling through the forest like a living...
Livia nodded, understanding. That's because it is. Every movement, every rustle, every shadow could be a message from the hidden order. They're patient. They've been watching centuries of empires rise and fall. They know how to move silently, how to test, and how to manipulate without revealing themselves. They reached the central courtyard, where a few guards were still on patrol. Livia watched them carefully. Most were experienced, yet subtle shifts in posture, nervous glances, or delayed responses could indicate uncertainty. The hidden order's presence was always psychological as well as physical. One of the guards, a young soldier named Gaius, approached hesitantly. "Commander Livia, some of the men, they're talking." Livia tilted her head. "Talking about what?" "About shadows in the forest, about whispers at the gate, about..." He stopped, glancing nervously at Marcus. "About Rufus and the arrow." Livia's jaw tightened. Exactly what I expected. Fear spreads faster than arrows, and the hidden order depends on it. Marcus frowned. "What do we do?" "We manage it," Livia said firmly. "We cannot ignore the morale of the men, but we also cannot reveal too much. Knowledge is power, but panic is poison." She motioned for Gaius to follow her to the edge of the courtyard. "Tell the men this," she instructed. "We are aware of the disturbances. We are monitoring the forest. Any unusual activity will be reported immediately. Do not act rashly. The night is long, and patience is our weapon." The young guard nodded, relief washing over his face. He repeated her words to the others, and gradually the tension in the courtyard eased. Livia returned to the command hall with Marcus. "The hidden order thrives on whispers and uncertainty," she said, laying the arrow, the token, and the scroll on the table. "Tonight, we've managed our own whispers, but we must also control what they see, what they think they know about us." Marcus studied the pieces carefully. "They're testing us. They want to provoke mistakes." "Yes," Livia said, "and we will not give them any. Every movement we make must be deliberate, every signal precise. We create the illusion of vulnerability, but we control it." Outside, the forest remained silent, the mist curling softly around the trees. Somewhere beyond the tree line, unseen eyes watched, measuring, noting, and adjusting. Livia could almost feel their presence, the invisible tension pressing through the shadows. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We wait, Marcus. They will make their next move soon, and when they do, we will be ready. Every whisper, every shadow, every movement, they are all threads in a tapestry. And tonight, we start weaving it in our favor." The scouts remained vigilant, the guards alert, and the forest, silent, secretive, and watchful, awaited the next moment. The night was thick with anticipation, the kind of stillness that made every footstep, every whisper, every movement feel amplified. Livia walked slowly through the central courtyard, her boots silent against the cold stone. Lanterns flickered, casting long shadows that twisted with the walls, blending with the darkness of the night. Marcus trailed behind, carrying maps and a small satchel of signal tools, his eyes never leaving the tree line. "Do you feel it?" Marcus asked quietly. "That sense that someone's closer than we think?" Livia nodded. "Closer, much closer. The hidden order isn't content to stay in the forest tonight. They're testing us, watching how we react, learning our patterns." As they moved toward the northern wall, a subtle shift caught Livia's attention, a shadow that didn't align with any lantern or guard. It flitted between the stone columns near the armory, careful, deliberate. She signaled Marcus to stay still. He froze immediately. Livia stepped lightly forward,
eyes fixed on the shadow. It moved with such precision, so calculated, that she knew immediately this wasn't an animal or a random wanderer. It was a scout, a trained agent of the hidden order. She watched as the figure paused, crouched behind a low stone wall, then disappeared again into the deeper shadow of the courtyard. Livia's mind raced. Whoever it was, they were mapping the fort, measuring response times and noting positions, just like the previous night. But this time they were daring to come inside the walls. "Do we confront?" Marcus whispered. "No," Livia said firmly. "We observe, we learn. If we engage now, they might spook them, and they'll vanish before we understand their purpose." She reached into her belt and retrieved a small copper disc, one of their signaling tools. She flicked it toward a nearby lantern, creating a brief glimmer of light. Immediately, hidden among the shadows, the scouts recognized the signal and froze. Their presence remained unseen to the intruder. The shadow moved again, closer to the armory. Livia's breath was steady, her mind clear. Every detail mattered: the angle of movement, the timing of pauses, the spaces the figure avoided. This was a reconnaissance mission, and she intended to record every observation. Then, without warning, the shadow vanished completely, leaving only the faint impression of disturbed gravel near the wall. Livia knelt to examine it. Footprints, small, light, precise. She traced them with her gloved hand. Whoever had passed had gone to great lengths to avoid leaving evidence, yet subtle traces remained for those who watched closely. "They're skilled," Marcus said, leaning over her shoulder. "Closer than any scout we've trained." "Yes," Livia replied, "and they're bold. They've learned to move inside the fort without engaging directly. Their aim isn't to fight tonight, it's to understand us, to know our weaknesses." She rose, her eyes scanning the courtyard and beyond to the forest line. "This changes nothing. Every movement they make, every shadow, every movement, they are all threads in a tapestry. And tonight we start weaving it in our favor." The scouts remained vigilant, the guards alert, and the forest, silent, secretive, and watchful, awaited the next moment. The next morning arrived pale and cold, the kind of morning where the sun looked tired before it even climbed the sky. Livia walked through the courtyard with a slow pace, studying every corner where the intruder might have stepped. The guards tried to look calm, but she could sense the tension hiding under their voices. A silent infiltration always left a deeper mark than a direct attack. Marcus joined her with a stack of reports. "I checked with every patrol. No one saw anything unusual after that shadow disappeared." "They weren't meant to see anything," Livia said. "That scout moved with purpose. They left clues only for us. They want to see how closely we pay attention." "But why risk coming inside the walls?" Marcus hesitated. "They could gather more from a distance." "That is exactly why they did it," Livia replied. "To send a message, not to the soldiers, to me." She stopped near the armory wall. The gravel still showed a faint mark, barely visible unless viewed from a low angle. She crouched, tracing it with her finger. It looked like a footprint, but there was something off about it. The heel was too soft, the impression too controlled, as if the scout had been trying to make it appear accidental. Marcus knelt beside her. "What do you see?" "An invitation," Livia said softly. "They want me to follow their trail, but only along the path they choose." Marcus frowned. "So it's a trap." "It's always a trap," she said. "But traps reveal intent, and intent reveals weakness." She stood again, brushing dust from her gloves. "Last night they learned our reaction time, our guard rotations, our silence signals. They learned how far I'm willing to step outside the gate, and now they want to know how far I'm willing to go inside their world." Marcus gave her a worried look. "That sounds dangerous." "It is, but danger is not what worries me. Uncertainty is." She walked toward the ramparts, scanning the forest as if searching for a familiar face hidden among the trees. The air shimmered a little in the morning light. Birds sang from branches that only hours ago had held shadows much colder than birds. She rested her hands on the stone wall. "They saw me step out of the gate last night. They saw that I didn't hide. Now they're asking how much more I'm willing to reveal." Marcus lowered his voice. "Then what is our move?" "We answer, but on our terms." She turned toward him. "Tonight, we adjust the guard rotations without announcing it. We shift the patrol pattern in a way that looks unplanned. We light only the southern torches and leave the northern side dark. We create a gap, but not one they expect. And we watch." Marcus nodded. You want to see if they step into the darkness again. Exactly. They think they decide the pace, but the moment we control the rhythm, they lose ground. A sudden shout from the far side of the courtyard caught their attention. A young guard came running, breathless and pale. "Commander," he said, holding out something wrapped in cloth. "This was found near the water well." Livia unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a small carved stone, smooth and oval, marked with a single vertical line. It was simple, too simple, which meant it was intentional. Marcus stared. "Another symbol?" "Yes," Livia said, "but this one is different. This wasn't meant to be hidden, it was meant to be found quickly." Marcus exhaled sharply. "What does it mean?" Livia closed her hand around the stone, feeling its cold surface. "It means they've stopped testing the walls." She met Marcus's eyes. "They're testing me." The courtyard settled into silence. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting for whatever came next. Livia slipped the stone into her belt pouch, her expression calm but sharper than the morning air. "We followed the plan," she said. "Tonight, everything changes." And somewhere beyond the tree line, in the quiet places where sunlight struggled to reach, she could almost feel the presence of the hidden order waiting, watching, and wondering whether she... Marcus gripped the rampart. What was that? What did they mark? "We'll check it," Livia said, "but the meaning is clear." She descended the stairs and crossed the courtyard with Marcus close behind. They reached the base of the wall where the intruder had touched it. A faint white mark glowed softly in the moonlight, a single horizontal line. Marcus frowned. First, the vertical line on the stone, now a horizontal one. "They're giving us pieces," Livia said quietly. "Pieces of a message, or a map, or something else entirely." She studied the mark longer, her expression thoughtful. "This isn't just observation anymore. They're leaving a pattern." Marcus stepped back. "Why? Why show their hand like this?" "Because," Livia said, "they want me to think I'm decoding them." She touched the line gently. It felt cool against her glove. "And they want to see what I do next." She looked toward the forest again, the shadows now still and empty. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start piecing this together. They're drawing something for us, and we're going to figure out what it is." The courtyard stood silent once more, but the air had changed. The hidden order had stepped into the open, not fully, but enough to suggest a new stage of the game was beginning. And now, Livia was ready to play it. Morning came slow and gray, the kind of dawn that felt more like another layer of night than a new day. Livia stepped into the courtyard with calm focus, her cloak trailing lightly behind her. The faint chalk line left by the intruders still marked the northern wall, untouched. Marcus was already there, staring at it with a mix of confusion and irritation. "It's too simple," he said. "A single line. What are we supposed to do with that?" "Everything simple is deliberate," Livia replied, "especially from them." She ran her fingers lightly above the mark, careful not to erase it. It was clean, straight, intentional. No hesitation in the stroke. The vertical mark they had left earlier was the same. Two symbols, both minimal yet precise. Vertical, horizontal. Two directions, two axes, two choices, or maybe two steps of something larger. Marcus folded his arms. "So, what do they want? For us to guess?" "No," Livia said, "for us to think. They're watching how we interpret this, not just the mark itself." A scout approached with a scroll. "Commander, reports from the night posts. No further movement in the forest. Nothing unusual." Livia nodded, dismissed him, and returned her attention to the mark. They didn't return because they didn't need to. They've already placed their message. The next move belongs to us. Marcus shook his head. "But why leave clues at all? They've spent years staying hidden. Why start revealing anything now?" Livia stepped back and looked up at the northern wall, then the forest. "Because last night they acknowledged me. That wasn't just a scout. That was someone testing the limits of the game. They wanted to see if I understood the intention behind stepping into the dark." Marcus rubbed his forehead. It still feels like they're trying to pull us into something we can't see. That's exactly what they're doing, she said. But we don't walk blind. We choose how far we follow. She walked toward the command hall. The wooden doors creaked softly as she pushed them open. Inside, maps covered the tables. The arrow, the token, the stone with the vertical mark, they were all laid neatly where she left them. She placed the new message beside them. Now, the pattern is starting to form, Livia said. Marcus stared at the marks. Vertical, horizontal, opposites, or alignment, she said, or intersection, or instruction. She paced around the room, speaking slowly. These symbols are simple, but simplicity is a language of its own. It could be teaching us direction, a meeting point, a location in the forest, or, her steps stopped, a warning about paths we're not supposed to cross. Marcus frowned. So, which one is it? That depends on the next symbol, and we won't get that until tonight. She placed her hand on the table, steady and calm. Until then, we observe. We do not respond. We make no markings, no signals. Silence is our answer. Let them wonder what we've understood. Marcus nodded slowly. Silence as strategy. Exactly. They returned to the courtyard. The sun had risen a little higher, though its light felt muted, thin. Soldiers moved about quietly, their pace steady but cautious. They didn't know what had changed during the night, but they sensed something had. Livia looked toward the dark line of trees. Somewhere beyond those shadows, someone was waiting, watching, measuring every choice she made. Tonight, she whispered, we give them nothing, and that will tell us everything. The forest didn't move, but the silence around it felt alive, charged with a question that hadn't been asked yet. A question the hidden order wanted her to answer with actions, not words. And she would, on her terms. Tiberius had grown used to the softness of the coastal winds near his villa, but nothing prepared him for the dry breath of the desert when he traveled east for a political visit. This part of the empire was quiet and remote, and he had come here only to settle a dispute between two minor governors. Yet he secretly enjoyed the journey, because every new place taught him something about peace. The desert, he believed, carried a kind of silence that did not exist anywhere else. On the third night of his stay, the sky turned a deep shade of violet. Not the purple of a painter's brush, but a natural, ancient light that seemed to come from inside the air itself. The local guards warned him that a desert wind was approaching and that the palace might shake a little. Tiberius nodded, but he wasn't worried. He had weathered bigger storms in Rome. What he didn't expect was how the wind would change the rhythm of the night. As the air shifted, the lamps flickered. Thin streams of sand slipped through the narrow cracks in the window frames, dancing like golden dust. The men became tense. The servants rushed around, closing doors, tightening ropes, preparing the structure. But Tiberius remained still. He watched the moving shadows as if observing an old friend. He listened to the whispers of the desert, which felt strange and gentle instead of frightening. When he finally retired to his sleeping chamber, the desert voice followed him. The wind hummed across the palace walls, steady and low. It wasn't loud enough to disturb him, but it filled the emptiness of the night with movement. Tiberius lay on the bed, hands folded on his chest, listening. He wondered what it would be like to live far from politics, far from judgment, far from the people who endlessly tried to manipulate him. Maybe a king could find peace only in the places where no one cared about crowns and power. Outside, the desert wind slowed, then returned with a circular rhythm. It felt like breathing. Tiberius closed his eyes and matched his breath with the pulse of the wind. Each inhale carried the warm scent of sun-baked sand. Each exhale released the tension that came from ruling an empire so large it sometimes felt like it pressed on his shoulders. For the first time in days, he felt a surprising calm. He sat up, reached for a small clay pot, and opened it. Inside were oil-dipped reeds given to him by a local healer. She had said, "This will quiet your mind if you let the desert speak to you." She lit one reed and let the soft smoke rise. The aroma was earthy and smooth. It didn't overpower the air, it blended with the wind. Soon the chamber smelled like warm soil after rain. Tiberius lay back again. The wind sang, the smoke curled, the silence around him softened. He remembered the healer's words. He remembered her calm, steady eyes. And then he felt as though the desert itself had taken him into its arms. His breathing slowed, his eyelids grew heavy. His thoughts loosened like grains of sand slipping through fingers. And just like that, the emperor drifted into one of the deepest sleeps of his life, carried by a wind older than any empire he could ever rule. After several weeks in Rome, Tiberius returned to his villa with one goal: to find a night of perfect rest. The city was alive with noise, politics, and subtle betrayals, and even the best guards could not prevent the constant friction from entering his mind. So he retreated to the garden, a space carefully designed for quiet reflection. At night, the hedges cast long, jagged shadows. The fountains whispered over stone, and the air was perfumed with jasmine and rosemary. Tiberius wandered slowly along the garden paths, feeling the cool grass beneath his sandals. Every step was deliberate. Every shadow was studied. The trees moved gently in the evening breeze, and he noticed how each leaf reflected the lantern light differently. When he reached the central fountain, he paused. Water spilled in soft arcs, catching the golden glow of a nearby lamp. He inhaled deeply, tasting the cool evening air mixed with floral scents. In that moment, the weight of Rome, its gossip. Each evening, before lying down on his bed, he would stand in the center of his chamber, close his eyes, and inhale slowly through his nose. The air traveled down into his lungs with a measured weight, filling his chest and belly. He held it gently, feeling the subtle tension it created, then exhaled smoothly through his mouth, imagining the worries of the day being expelled along with the air. Each cycle became a quiet exercise of release. The emperor paired this breathing with visualization. On the inhale, he pictured calm, steady light filling his body, relaxing each muscle in turn. On the exhale, he imagined darkness and shadow carrying away tension, doubts, and restless thoughts. The process was deliberate but effortless, and with each cycle, he sank a little deeper into stillness. Tiberius often synchronized his breath with small, intentional sounds within the chamber. The soft murmur of a fountain, the faint hiss of an oil brazier, or the distant rustle of draperies in the wind became a metronome. Inhalation and exhalation moved with these subtle rhythms, creating a natural harmony between body and environment. Each sound, each cycle of breath reinforced calm, guiding the mind away from distraction. On nights when his thoughts were particularly active, Tiberius added another layer to the ritual: counting. Inhale to the count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6, pause for 2. This structured pacing was not strict, rather it acted as a gentle anchor, giving the mind a task that was simple and absorbing enough to prevent wandering, yet light enough to encourage relaxation. Eventually, he would lie down, letting the chamber, the scents, and the shadows cradle him. The breath continued, slow and steady, like the tide washing over a quiet shore. Muscles softened, heartbeat steadied, and the mind surrendered gradually. Even as dreams approached, the rhythm of the breath served as a tether to calm, ensuring that sleep remained restorative, unbroken, and deep. Tiberius found that this careful attention to breathing also sharpened the next day's clarity. He awoke refreshed, not only physically, but mentally prepared to navigate the complexities of Rome. The art of sleep, he realized, was inseparable from the art of control over the body, the mind, and the environment. The breath of the night became both guide and guardian, escorting him safely through darkness and into the rejuvenating light of dawn. As the emperor rested in this way, the city outside might have been loud with politics and intrigue, but within his chamber, every inhalation and exhalation created a private sanctuary. There was no empire in the world more powerful than a ruler who had mastered the rhythm of his own breath. And in that mastery, Tiberius found the peace that few in Rome could claim. Tiberius's pursuit of perfect sleep sometimes led him beyond the familiar comforts of his bedroom. Within his villa, a hidden chamber existed, a secret space unknown to all but a few trusted attendants. The room was small, almost austere, with bare walls of smooth stone, a low bench, and a tiny fountain carved into one corner. Its purpose was singular, to offer absolute stillness and isolation, a place where even the softest sound from the outside world could not penetrate. The entrance was cleverly disguised behind a large tapestry depicting a pastoral scene. Pulling aside the fabric revealed a narrow doorway leading to a spiral stair that descended a few steps into the chamber. The air inside smelled faintly of the stone itself, cool and dry, carrying no scent of the palace perfumes or oils. Tiberius often used this room when he sought sleep that was uninterrupted by the weight of empire, away from servants, guards, and even the city itself. Once inside, he would light a small brazier, careful that its flame did not flicker too brightly. The light was muted, reflecting softly on the stone walls, creating a quiet dance of shadow that was steady and predictable. No perfumes were used here. Sometimes he preferred the pure simplicity of the air, allowing the absence of scent to become a signal for the mind to calm. He would sit on the bench for several minutes, eyes closed, focusing entirely on the rhythm of his breath. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. The sound of the water from the fountain and the slow crackle of the brazier blended with the movement of his lungs. Each breath became a pulse, guiding his awareness into deeper relaxation. The hidden chamber was designed to isolate, but Tiberius also found it inspired imagination. Without distractions, his mind wandered freely, yet gently, like a river following a smooth channel. Sometimes he allowed himself to visualize past experiences, not in a restless or anxious way, but like watching shadows moving across a wall. Moments from childhood, travels across the empire, and encounters with advisors and soldiers drifted past in a calm procession. In this quiet, memory itself became a guide for rest. When he was ready, Tiberius would recline on the low bench, adjusting his posture carefully. Muscles relaxed fully, supported by the firmness of the stone beneath him. His breathing remained steady, each cycle lengthened slightly to deepen the sense of calm. Shadows from the brazier flickered softly across the walls, creating a gentle hypnotic rhythm that matched the pulse of his body. Here, sleep was pure. There were no interruptions, no half-waking moments. The hidden chamber offered Tiberius a sanctuary where the mind could drift entirely free from the empire's demands. Hours passed unnoticed. The emperor awoke only when he chose, restored in body and mind, the pressures of rule temporarily held at bay. For Tiberius, this chamber was more than a room, it was an instrument of mastery. In mastering this space, he mastered his own rest. In mastering rest, he regained a power few rulers could claim, the ability to govern from a place of complete clarity, calm, and renewal. Within these walls, sleep was not a necessity, it was an art form perfected through discipline, ritual, and unwavering attention to every detail. Tiberius had always believed that the environment itself could speak to the mind, guiding it toward calm or disturbance. In his private chambers and villa, every detail of construction was chosen to shape the experience of rest. Among these, the walls played a silent but critical role. Thick, polished stone absorbed unwanted noise, creating an acoustic cocoon. Yet, beyond silence, the walls seemed to carry a whisper of their own, a subtle resonance that Tiberius learned to interpret and use to guide his sleep. The whispering was not literal, of course, but a combination of ambient sound and architectural design. When the wind shifted outside, it flowed through small gaps in the stonework, producing faint echoes. Water from the fountains trickled against carved channels in the walls, producing soft rhythms. Tiberius found that these subtle, consistent sounds, when combined with careful breathing, acted as a lullaby of sorts, signaling the mind to release tension. He would often sit against a wall before retiring, leaning back lightly, closing his eyes and letting the faint vibrations carry into his awareness. Each small sound became a point of focus, a marker that replaced the clutter of thought. Footsteps from the distant corridors of the villa were muted by the thick stone, yet their occasional rhythm provided a gentle reminder of the world beyond, enough to ground the mind without demanding attention. The walls themselves contributed visually as well. Polished stone reflected the minimal light of braziers in soft gradients, creating patterns that shifted as flames flickered. Shadows moved subtly, echoing the gentle murmur of air and water. Tiberius found that these patterns, while simple, helped to anchor the mind. He could trace the flow of shadow and sound together, a silent orchestra of darkness and resonance, carrying him.